Please welcome our Faith in the Public Square panel with Chad Connelly, Robert Tyler, and David Barton.
Of all the applauses I've ever received, that wasn't one of them. Let's work better. David Barton's here. Come on. Chad Connelly, Bob Tyler, come on.
We're going to hit Faith in the Public Square, and these are all folks that have been actively engaged on the front lines, not just theoretically, and actually, people like Rob have undergone some real transformations on engagement over the years. And so let's start by just kind of introducing everybody, letting them introduce themselves, what they do. Chad Connelly, I talked about Chad some this morning when we talked about that Virginia example that happened to the 312 churches. That's Faith Wins. That's Chad. That's part of what they do all over the nation. Chad, tell us about Faith Wins and what happens.
Yeah, I'm just out there trying to build pastor networks. I was state party chairman in South Carolina. Had a theory that if we just maximize the Christian vote, helped a guy named Mick Mulvaney win a congressional, hadn't been a Republican in the seat.
Does anyone need a translator for the accent?
I speak Southern.
Yeah.
And then I got to be the first ever national director of faith engagement for either party from 13 to 17, left there to run Faith Wins. Been doing that ever since.
And Rob Thousand Oaks pastor, former mayor, and then COVID hit and all sorts of stuff, kind of your experience. And you can introduce Rob because you guys are kind of a tag team here in some ways.
Well, I love my wife and my kids, and then in line right after that, my attorney. So that's funny. Jeepers, you guys are tough.
It's after lunch, bro.
Yeah,
It doesn't work after lunch.
Raise your hand if you're born on your birthday. Okay. So it's one thing to go into battle and realize you have a pit bull behind you. And that's Bob Tyler, and he's been with me every step of the way. As I told you guys last night, when we went down the list of all the things we could lose, and he was trying to scare the daylights out of me, I said, I intend on breaking the law, and I know you can't counsel me to do that, but if I do, will you defend me? And you said yes. And you've never left our side ever since, and he is tenacious. Bob Tyler. You got to talk.
May I introduce something? I think there's an atmosphere change happening in the nation. Certainly, I've got enough white hair to have seen some changes. But one of the things you find in Proverbs is Proverbs 22:21 says, a wise man attacks the city of the mighty and pulls down the stronghold in which they trust. And it's being offensive-minded. And for years and years, Christian legal groups were very defensive-minded. If you get sued, we'll come defend you. That has to be turned around. And by the way, just for things on the Supreme Court, usually when we have a religious liberty case at the Supreme Court, we'll get one win every 2 to 4 years. We had 5 wins at the Supreme Court this year on religious liberty. There are more religious liberty opportunities that you have now than you've had in 60 years. But the problem is breaking the thinking up here that says I can't do certain things and getting offensive-minded. It's like with Coach out of Washington. He can now pray at football game. What's going to happen is this fall, about 10,000 coaches are going to kneel down and pray at a football game because he can. And there's going to be about 10,000 lawsuits. Every school district is going to say, you can't do that. Even though we got the Dobbs decision sets all the way back to the states, every state is still having to fight now to get there. Like Texas, we have a trigger law. We've had to go through all the lawsuits, even though the Supreme Court said we're back to state law. So this stuff, you have to fight, and you have to be aggressive and willing to fight. And that's where Rob's really been the guy that has stepped out and has not been willing just to win the lawsuit. It's like we need to make an example and really push back against these guys so they leave us alone. So what's happened with Rob, and for those of you who don't know, a lot of the COVID shutdown started out here in California, and the churches were considered non-essential, and a lot of guys said, well, you may not consider us essential, but God does, and the Bible does, and we're standing. And so that's where a lot of these lawsuits came. And so, actually, you heard Jack, well, guess what? Rob's the attorney for Jack as well as for Rob here, and also for Mike McClure up in Northern California. Got one of the craziest things still going with COVID stuff up there with lawsuits. So, Rob, kind of explain what's going on.
Well, I'd like to kind of explain it this way. Imagine you're a surfer and you're looking at this big wave coming at you. And you can either be excited or you can be petrified. And that's, I think, we're the church. We're surfing. Either you're going to ride that wave and you're going to enjoy it. It's the times of the signs of the times are so apparent right in front of us. And like Pastor Jack was just saying a few minutes ago, and I've heard him say so many times, and Rob, we should be excited about this time, about where we're at, with regard to the fact that they shut us down. And I can remember the call that we were on. Some of you pastors may have been on it with Pastor Jack and myself. And Pastor Jack said, wouldn't it be great if we all opened at the same time? This was probably March or April of 2020. And so Jack and I talked afterwards, and we came up with the Declaration of Essentiality. And 3,000 pastors signed up to say, we're going to reopen regardless of what the governor thinks. We're going to open with or without his consent. And we fight back. And then we have pastors like Rob, who's in Ventura County, and Mike McClure up in Santa Clara County, which is the epicenter of COVID-19 in terms of the shutdowns. That's where it all started, was Santa Clara County. And these guys took a stand, and I just, I love pastors who've taken stands all around the country, but how many have actually been told by a judge, shut your church down? And this guy right here said, sorry to be, so casual, but I love this guy. Rob and Mike said, I can't close down. In spite of my recommendation saying you really should do this and understand all of these things are going to happen. And I was actually hoping Rob would say, I'm not going to shut down. And I knew he wouldn't. So, it's kind of a rhetorical question when you ask, are you going to defend me? And yes, because we need pastors to stand up. And, us lawyers, David, you and I, we're called to, I believe that my foundational purpose is to defend the First Amendment right to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. Not to wave the red flag, red, white, and blue, but and it never became more apparent than when the COVID-19 lockdowns happened, and we had to stand up, and we had to say, you really had to look at jail in the eyes. We went into court not knowing whether or not Rob was going to leave the court.
I had clean underwear.
And with Mike, last time I talked to Mike, but it was like $3.4 million that Santa Clara County has fined him. They're still fining him $5,000 every service he has, even though COVID's long out the door. It's still going on. He's still got millions hanging over his head.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit but for both cases, I'll just give you a quick update. We had about 7 cases here in California. One, Pastor Jim Franklin. I know you're in the room, but these lights, I can't see a thing. His was one of the cases in the city, in the county. The state backed down, and that had to do with the lockdowns, and that settled. But for Rob, the county came and said, well, we want to settle. And we got together and we said, well, if we settle, then we're never going to get to the bottom of why. Why did this lockdown happen? What was the basis? Let's force their hand to prove this. So what happened in Rob's case, we actually are up on appeal now to keep our case alive because a judge dismissed it with absolutely no legal rationale to do so. He just didn't want us to be able to get to the evidence. With Pastor Mike McClure up north, his case is ongoing, and I appreciate your prayers because next week we're going to be taking the deposition of the county health officer. This county health officer is, along with the lawyer who's a Soros plant into the county of Santa Clara, and I say that his name is on one of the Soros websites affiliated. They are the architects, these two, the architects of the shutdown, the COVID shutdown. So they'll have a lot of egg on their face. But the good news is that most recently we had a hearing. The judge, a federal judge in San Francisco, who was originally against us, and we said, wait, and Rob, you remember this. I said, we got to slow play this because I represent the 2 toughest pastors to defend because they're saying, we're not going to wear masks. We're not going to prevent people from hugging. We're not going to not sing. We're not going to do these things that they're forcing us to do. And so when the counties came after them, is a very difficult case. So we slow played it. And now with Mike, the judge originally against us, in the last hearing, she looked to the county council and said, I don't think you want to die on this hill. And she went on further and said, I'd suggest you get to mediation as quick as you can and settle this thing. So we're fighting it, and we want to uncover the evidence behind the lockdowns, which frankly there isn't evidence. There is not enough evidence. There's nothing there. And we know it. And so, let's ride the wave and enjoy it while we're doing it.
So really having backbone makes a huge amount of difference. Legal side, political side as well. Chad, you've seen things happening now on the political side, and a lot of, with a lot of judges, they are elected judges, state judges, et cetera. And that's where churches can have an impact, is on the quality of individuals we have judging. A verse that has always stood out to me, Isaiah 126, when God's talking to Isaiah and says, I'm going to restore the nation, get it back. He says, I'll give you judges as at the beginning and lawyers as at the first, and then you'll be called a city of righteousness. And it's like having the right kind of attorneys, the right kind of judges makes a difference, and that can be done politically as well as legally. Chad, to you. So how to get involved in things like that, how to get involved in elections and what to do.
Yeah, I'm really just fired up about what you're doing, because this is what I've spent my political career doing. I was state party chairman in South Carolina, and we just went out and strategically picked churches. We strategically looked at counties and precincts, and our phrase was, let's run up the score. And we told them, to use a Bob McCoy line, we don't need you to charge the beach at D-Day, but can you register everybody to vote? And can you make sure they vote biblical values? And we teach them. We don't believe that life is political, it's spiritual. We don't believe that marriage is political, it's a spiritual issue. We don't believe religious liberty is there. Give you an example right now. Those are not political issues, they're spiritual issues. Have people go vote that way. And we tell them in our South Carolina phrase, Jesus ain't running, therefore you're always voting for the lesser of two evils. Therefore, the responsibility is ours. And so we just really try to go out and maximize the Christian vote and voice. And I left the state party chairmanship in South Carolina, and I worked for the RNC and got to sit in all those political rooms. We were in the room with the Trump campaign and with the RNC, and they want your vote. They don't want your voices. Yeah, and so, but that was my job. That's what I did. I sat in there, and I realized I'd rather do this through a ministry side. I'd rather do this through a 501c3. And so I left there and started Faith Wins then, just to do the same thing. That was to go connect with pastors and empower them. I don't want to come to your church and do voter registration, but you know what? You ought to be doing voter registration. Everybody here needs to run a voter registration drive. We're going to show you a QR code in a little bit that you can hit, and it'll give you all the details for your state, because the rules are different and the laws are different and all that kind of thing. But you ought to run a voter registration drive. Nobody needs to come in and do it for you. You've got somebody in your church who is throwing stuff at the television set, going, I want to help. I want to do something about this. Great. Grab a table, sit in the back of the church, put a chair out there, here are the forms, and make sure everybody there is registered. And that's what happened in Virginia. We had so many people that mocked me. My political buddies laughed at me for getting involved in Virginia. And I contracted with 7 bivocational pastors. We picked 10 house districts, and I said, we're going to flood the zone and run up the score. That was it. We found 312 churches to do voter registration. They registered 77,000 new evangelicals. And it was funny because David was with me, Bob McCoy was with me, a bunch of places. All the people that criticized us for going after the church vote, they were the first ones to knock people over to get in front of the television set Wednesday morning. Look what we did. We didn't want the credit. We don't care about the credit. We're losing the country, y'all. And if it's not, the least thing you can do is run voter registration and make sure they vote biblical values, especially in a blue-purple state like a Virginia. They've given up. It's gone so far left that people said, Chad, we just don't believe it. And now there's a guy named Youngkin who's giving my cell phone out. You ought to talk to that guy. Because all the people who mocked us realized, man, the hidden vote, just like David's numbers were showing a little bit earlier today, the hidden vote is sitting in the churches, and the pastors are the key, and that's where I'll fall.
Did you train poll watchers?
We did not train anybody. What we did was we recruited them. And can I tell the story real quick? So we were there early, and we had those 7 guys on the ground. We met with 21. I actually contracted with 7 in January 2021. And they said, what do we do? What do we do? And I said, well, people are kind of worried about the election integrity. Why don't we go to the State Election Commission? We made 44 of the 131 counties in Virginia. We didn't have the bandwidth. So we went in, I wrote a little 3x5 card. We're here to pray with you, here to pray for you. What can we do to help? And the first thing was, one of my mentors, Dr. Mike Edwards, went into a county election official, and there was a thing on the wall that said, now hiring seasonal workers to count votes during the early voting. They call it centralized absentee precinct. 45 days of early voting in Virginia. 45 days. So Dr. Edwards says, ma'am, what are seasonal workers? And the lady kind of got flustered, and she said, well, they pick fruit in the fall and the summer, and they're available, and they're cheap. He said, are they Americans? And the lady said, some of them. He said, can I bring my church? That's what started it. And we called it our Miss Bessie project. She was a little old lady in a Baptist church down the street, and Miss Bessie wore them out because she wasn't from the party. She wasn't from a TPUSA or a Faith to Wins. But that is how, David mentioned, we found 27 people registered at the same time. We started getting a photocopy of everybody's newly registered people every Friday night at midnight. And they said, what are you looking for? I said, I don't know, but you'll know it when you see it. I sent them to the poll worker training. There was a poll watcher kind of category, and then a sworn election officer, which sworn election officers, depending on your state, there's some kind of category for that. There's a different level. They can participate more. They don't impede the vote, but they can question the vote. That's how we found the person that registered 27 times. One day they called and said, Chad, there's 17 people registered this one address. What do you think? I said, it's a big house. And they said, okay, and what do you think we ought to do? I said, I think I'd send my Sunday school class. We had Sunday school class groups going out. It was a field. It was a field. And so we started doing that and finding out that there were actually looked at 3,000 early votes. Our first blush was 7.4% looked bad. It was 5.2%. And if you extrapolate that, it was like 12 or 14,000 votes. And it was just people. They weren't from the party. They weren't from an organization. They were people like me and you. And so when I started putting the QR code up, we were blown away. We recruited 1,343 people that want to be poll watchers. I'll guarantee you, you've got people in your church right now. So we're actually doing this in all the battleground states. We're recruiting poll watchers. If you got people that want to get involved and they say, we don't know what to do, I know what to do. I know what to do. You know, I've run a bunch of races, been involved at the state party level, the national level. We can get people involved, and it's a great way to let the biblical citizenship folks that are getting involved see exactly how they can make a difference in their state.
What was the difference between New Jersey and Virginia?
Yeah, New Jersey and Virginia. So I actually went to New Jersey and met with some people. They were in the same boat. They could have won. I actually met with them early on, and they just didn't believe they could do it. They literally didn't believe they could do it. And I think that most of these elections are won on the margins. And just like David's numbers prove, that 3 or 4 points, and that's our target this year. David and I and Bob McCoy, we're looking at strategically. We've done 62 meetings in 17 states, just either small pastor meetings and then larger meetings at night. When these guys speak, people listen and they go, wow, I didn't know that. In New Jersey, they didn't buy into it. Now, we're going to do 63 more this year that we know about. I have over 90 pastors who've asked to host, but we're trying to be strategic. They're like all these, races that might matter. And so we're trying to put meetings there just to maximize the Christian vote. Not just because of a governor's race or a president's race or a Congress race, congressional race. It's the school board, y'all. It's the city council. Christian voices and votes need to be maximized everywhere. And New Jersey, they just didn't buy in.
We're told in scriptures, obviously, we're told we're light, but Ephesians tells us that light will bring to light the hidden things of darkness. And part of the purpose of what we should be doing is bringing to light the hidden things of darkness. And I remember in Virginia, there were 3 clerks that resigned after they found out poll watchers.
Within an hour.
Yeah, that's right. Tell that quick story.
Yeah, like I said, we sent Sunday school classes in, and in those 44 counties we went to, 3 election, the county commission people quit. We got a pastor named Tom Alvis right outside of Richmond. He goes in, and he had read the code. This guy, on his own, read the code. And by the way, he's now running my national effort because of this. So he goes in, and there's an official there who's been there for 35 years. And Tom says, are you going to do this, this, this? And the guy said, we don't do it that way. Tom said, how long have you been here? He said, 35 years. Tom said, you've been breaking your own state law for 35 years? And the guy said, did you read the code? Tom said, yeah, I read the code. They put this pastor on the election commission in that county. He pastors in one county. He lives in another county. So he has recruited over 20 people to be county election officials in those two counties. And it was just because he got involved and said, we can make a difference.
So, Rob, we were talking outside too on the things that you see coming at the church, because we're seeing some things turn and change now. Certainly there's the political side, there's the legal side. What do you see coming at the church?
Like I said, I think that we're seeing a very large wave coming at the church from all sorts of arenas. Technology. I'll address technology real quick. In the area of technology, you've all heard about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, probably, right? Nobody, yeah, some have, right? But this is the law that President Trump filed a lawsuit challenging the social media companies because they wouldn't allow him to, they would cancel him. Twitter canceled his accounts, that sort of thing. And we have a lawsuit that we filed on behalf of a gentleman who was a former homosexual and a Christian pastor. And when we brought this lawsuit, I argued it in Manhattan just before COVID. And the Vimeo, the video platform, used Section 230 to say, wait a minute, we have immunity from all lawsuits, even if we did discriminate in violation of state law against someone because of their religion or because of their sexual orientation or anything. We're immune from liability, therefore we cannot be sued. And I argued to the judge, I said, Your Honor, wait a minute. If that's a misinterpretation of the law, and the Ninth Circuit got it wrong, of course, because the Ninth Circuit essentially held that. And the Ninth Circuit basically says, you can, if a company discriminates against you because you're a black Muslim, it's okay for them to do that. So I used that with the judge. I said, this cannot be what Congress intended in the early 90s when they adopted this law. Well, as it stands today, the judge did not agree with me, followed the Ninth Circuit. So we have federal courts on both sides of the country that now say that an interactive computer service has immunity from liability if they are sued because they discriminated against somebody on the basis of their faith, Christianity, they deleted them from their accounts. Now, what does that mean? What's an internet service company? Look on your phone. Pull your iPhone out or whatever phone you have and look at every app that you have on there. They all qualify. What does this mean when it comes to cryptocurrency and other things where you might have credit cards on your phone? And it's not just on your phone, it's any computer service. So your laptop, your computer, your desktops. All of these entities, like Amazon and the like, have the ability to tell you, today, I'm not servicing you any longer because we don't agree with who you are because you're a Christian. So the wave that I see is that the law is set up, and it's exciting because the law is set up for Revelation 13 to be implemented, and I think we're one crisis away. And it's set up to be able to say, you can't buy or sell. And with digital currency coming our way, with President Biden issuing a proclamation not long ago to investigate a federal digital currency, it's kind of crazy. And I was asked to share one thing I was sharing a little earlier today. When we're looking at these things, it's exciting because I see the end times. I mean, they're facing us. And when looking at this, it's incredibly exciting because what you have is, when you look at Matthew 22 and you see lawlessness will abound and the love of many will grow cold, and then what is the lawlessness? What are we seeing today? What's the most basic law? God created us in his image, male and female. And so we're faced with this craziness now, that this new norm of transgenderism, and so we're seeing these things, and it's being shoved on us, and the love of many will grow cold. That's the agape love that people will not have the courage to stand up and tell these people that, wait a minute, you are born male and female. There's so much happening. There's so much coming our way, whether it's technology or different things that, honestly, it's an exciting time because you just have to realize what we're up against and the opportunity really to share the gospel.
We're going to put a couple of QR codes up periodically as we go. One is for Chad and one is for Rob, legal and political stuff. And by the way, with Chad's, if you scan that QR code, we will connect you. He has staff that will connect anybody in the country, their church, with their own precinct, their own election laws, et cetera, and we'll take people through how to get engaged. So the same stuff that was done in Virginia, the Constitution makes it real clear that states get to set their own standards for their elections. So they get to set the time, place, and manners of elections. There's 50 states, there's 50 different laws on how elections occur. That's just the way the founders set it up. It's great. We're not all monolithic, stereotypical. So what Chad's got is guys that will help connect you with the laws in your state, and if you got people in your church that want to be poll watchers or want to help at an election or want to be election judges or whatever, Chad can get you connected along with a lot of other stuff as well, and Rob as well on legal questions, legal stuff that's there. So one of the things that, well, I guess, Rob, go back to you, because the stuff you were sharing from your standpoint on what you do now is better. Because I remember you years ago when you were a lot less reticent to get involved in anything, and then you end up in the middle of being mayor, and you're there when the shooting occurs and get out because of COVID. So kind of talk about your transformation, what brought you across, why you're as active as you are now, and what helped you become that type of active pastor.
All right. Thank you, David. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but my parents were politically active. And I walked precincts, and my mom was president of the Republican Women. My dad ran for city council. So when I became a Christian, I was shocked that people weren't involved in politics. I couldn't understand it. And they used to say, well, we just do the gospel. We avoid politics. Politics is dirty. I'm like, so's the church. What's your point?
Yeah, that's right.
And I heard all the excuses. And I'm pre-trib, pre-millennial, and I don't know what all you are. That's not an issue. It'll all pan out in the end. But I want to say something, Bob, and this is a frustration for me, because we take our eschatology to justify our apathy in many cases. And what I mean by that, and listen, you can get upset with me. I'm just telling you what I see across the country as I travel. And Jesus says you don't know the day nor the hour. And you look at Jeremiah when he goes to the potter's house, he says, if I intend evil for a nation and they repent, I'll relent from the evil I intended. If I intend good and they cease to do the good, I'll relent from the good I intended. The idea is we can't be self-fulfilling prophecy and be Luddites and be afraid of technology. A friend of mine who's a Shadow Admiral at DevGru, Navy SEAL, he just said, technology is technology. Use it for good. And we look at it and we think, oh, that's the mark of the beast, one world government, we can't stop, it's an unstoppable juggernaut, you're fighting against the will of God. I don't operate that way. And our young people look at that and they say, I have no future. There's no way I can contend because it's an unstoppable juggernaut. That's declaring when the end. And now we're supposed to be prepared and look at the horizon. And I want them to come right now. I'm serious. You people are great, but I want out of here. But I think of it this way: if we don't contend for the future generations, they have more hope listening to Greta Thunberg if she can stop cows from flatulating. And I really we must contend for their sake. And I didn't want to sit by and be idle as I watched California go from being the 5th largest GDP on the face of the earth. Calvary Chapel started here in 1968. Chuck Smith in 68 had broken away from the Foursquare Church, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. had been shot at the Hilton in LA by Sirhan Sirhan. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was shot in the balcony of Memphis, Tennessee in a motel. All their political heroes had been assassinated, and these young people checked out of the church, and they checked into Eastern religion and drug use, and they ended up awash on the shores of California, and Chuck and Kay went after them. And they avoided politics because they just wanted to keep the main thing the plain thing, and the plain thing the main thing, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book. And we saw 10,000% growth. And at one point, 4 of the 10 largest churches in America were Calvary Chapels. But in 1968, when Chuck started Calvary Chapel, Reagan was governor of California. We had the 5th largest GDP. We just finished the California Aqueduct, which is a marvel in civil engineering. And then all of a sudden, Chuck begins to minister to these folks. They come in droves. And you think 10,000% growth, and that's conversion growth, not transfer growth. And I said earlier, more Calvary Chapels in California from Van Nuys to the border than there are Dunkin' Donuts. And how did the gospel change California? By avoiding politics, by the way. We no longer have the 5th largest GDP. We have the 6th. We have the highest gas tax, sales tax, income tax, corporate tax. We lead the nation in debt. You combine the next largest state's debt, it doesn't equal the debt of California. We're the authors of no-fault divorce, transgender bathroom bills, the most secular, progressive sexual education curriculum. It's vile. And we have aborted more children in the state of California than the entire population of Canada. So where's the power of that gospel? And my question is, you abandon the public square, Matthew 16:18. Upon this rock, he says it to Peter, upon this rock I will build mine. Everyone says church, and that's not the word. Tyndale translated correctly, and for that word he was hung and his remains were burned. He translated assembly. Jesus didn't use a religious term. He didn't say synagogue or temple. He said ecclesia or ecclesia. And Tyndale translated assembly. Aristotle, hundreds of years earlier, defined what an ecclesia was. It was the city hall, where people gathered for the welfare and decided the fate of their city-state by deciding roads and military and all of the things for public works. So upon this rock I'll build my public square, and the gates which enslave will not prevail. Law is the wise restraints that make men free. When you have the moral law and you apply restraints towards evil, man excels. America was given freedom, we've excelled. When you remove God and the moral law, the civil law becomes a weapon to enslave, and the gates of hell then are locked. Jesus has come to set the captives free. We must contend in the public square, and the greatest trick the enemy has played on us is to keep us out of the ecclesia. While we have been doing church, the secular progressive left has dominated the ecclesia. It says, pray for kings and those in authority that we live quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness and reverence. And as you said earlier, you can't name your 5 city council members and your 5 school board members by name, or the issues they're dealing with that will allow the citizens of your community to live quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness and reverence. Well, I don't do politics. As you said, I'm tired of voting for the lesser 2 evils. Unless Jesus is running for office, that's what's happening. There's no excuse. And love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbors yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law of the prophets. And they say you don't love your neighbor when we contended. I love the neighbor who the abused who've been quarantined with their abuser. The elderly who've died alone. The children whose schools have been shuttered, and the 65% of the businesses in Ventura that will never reopen because of this nightmare. I have a question for the pastors that didn't contend. What did it cost you? We had $350,000 in fines. I was brought before the judge on 2 contempt charges. Honestly, he thought I was going to jail. I did too. My wife and I said goodbye. And it was my birthday, for goodness sakes. It was irritating. But you know, rights are like muscles. If you don't exercise them, you lose them. And the Apostle Paul said, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty for which Christ has set you free. He wrote that in prison. Liberty is doing what's right. Freedom is having choices. I learned that from Bob McCoy. If that sounds familiar, I've stolen everything from him and you. And the reason why I stand here now is because God equips saints in the body of Christ to understand the power of the law, the wise restraints that make men free, and prepares them to defend the body of Christ. And when Charlie and I wanted to put this together, we wanted to bring attorneys and doctors. We wanted to bring historians. We wanted to give you a buffet line that you could pick anything to prepare yourself for the coming attack, so that you don't have to cower, you don't have to hide, you don't have to move to Montana and get a gate with canned goods and an AR-15. We're more than conquerors in Christ Jesus, and God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And we love our neighbor, and we'll contend for their freedom.
I love that story, and I just want to tell you stories. I got to assume there's somebody in here who thinks I shouldn't be involved. It's beyond my reach, or maybe somebody watching online. I want to tell you about 2 pastors that Bob McCoy and David Barton and I were in their churches. One of them's outside of Atlanta, Georgia, named Billy Ingram. He came up to me and said, Chad, nobody's ever told me this before. I was reluctant. God created 3 institutions, the family, the church, and the state. I've been a 2/3 pastor. I'm going to be a 3/3 pastor from now on. And that guy is doing flips to make a difference in his community. Second guy
in his church, they are near 4 counties. And out of his church, it's not a large church, just a few hundred people, they have the political leadership in all 4 counties just out of his church.
All 4.
So that has a whole lot to do with the type of candidates you get, the type of funding and support those candidates get, the type of policies that come out. That church, he's a 3/3 pastor now, but they have dominated 4 counties just by being salt and light. And they didn't try to get political. They just wanted influence. And it's a great example.
And stop bathrooms, SOGI bills.
That's right.
At the county level. And the other one I want to tell you about is a pastor in Asheville, North Carolina. He said, all my people are registered. I said, Pastor Sexton, I double dog dare you. Just try it. 2,000 people coming to church on a Sunday. They registered over 440 people who'd never voted before because he did voter registration for the first time in his 30-something year career. Everybody ought to be doing voter registration. I don't know if they put the QR code up there, but all you got to do, hold your phone up, go to that. You need to be involved in that. We will help you. We will make it easy. We'll give you all the information based on what state you're in to make sure you don't have to do anything except have somebody sit in the very back of the room. That's it right there. Now, you got to find a 12-year-old if you don't understand this, but put your camera to that. It'll take you to a website. I promise you, I won't bug you. I don't have time for that. But if you want information, if you'd like to host a David Barton or a Bob McCoy and Faith Wins American Restoration Tour, there's a bunch of you in here who are already doing that. We'd love to look at other places, maybe not all this year, but I think it's critical that the church get involved at every level and permeate society like never before. That's where we got to go back to.
Can I interject real quick? A lot of you pastors that are here from California, how many? I'm guessing the majority. California pastors.
It looks about
Quarter?
Yeah, no more than that.
Yeah.
A lot.
40%.
Okay. Many of you are probably thinking, it's California. Why worry about this? The reality of it is that your city council members, your county boards of supervisors, the school boards, you will have people who win by a margin of 50, 60 votes, 100 votes, 150 votes.
52 votes right here.
And that's a great example. 52 votes, he wins. Your church, if you have more than 52 people at your church, you could have swayed an election.
That's right.
And here at a time when chaos was ensuing with a shooting, who was in the role of leadership on national TV talking about the Lord? It was Rob McCoy. Because in Thousand Oaks, he was the mayor at the time. And thanks to those 52 people who came out and voted for you.
That's sweet. So they have QR codes. I don't, but I want to give you some. It's my cell number. If you need any help, text me. And if I don't respond, because I get a lot of texts, obviously, just keep bugging me. And if you don't want to write it down, don't. But we'll help you with all the resources we have, and I'll be there to assist you in any way. 805-490-6360. If you bug me and misuse it, I'll block you. But any way we can be of help. And we got 2 minutes. Maybe you want to do a question or two?
Yeah, we can do that. One thing, let me throw out also, in Malachi 2, when it talks, the Lord's into restoring the people at that point. That's part of the restoration, rebuilding going on with Malachi. But he told the people that if you want to know what the law is, go ask the priest. And it wasn't just the ecclesiastical law, it was every aspect of the law. And that's the way the American founding was. What I showed you this morning when John Adams said, where do we get our ideas? He pointed to pastors. It's not just the conversion stuff, it's the discipleship stuff. And I really encourage you to be broad-minded in that. All it means, the legal stuff as well. There's just a whole lot there. People need to go to you to find out what the law means and what the law says. Not just the Bible law, but every law that's out there. We're the ones that have the best perspective on it.
We got 2 minutes. I want it all.
Go for it.
Because you guys are chowderheads. No, I'm kidding. I stole the time too. I want to say.
You want us to stay up on stage?
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just the Rob McCoy hour. I wanted to share with you all, and Bill Fetter is going to go in great detail, but it's at a Numbers 30. It's this idea of tacit submission. Speak now or forever hold your peace, and you hear that at a wedding, and that comes out of Numbers 30. And it's the idea that if the father is silent, he consents. And silence in the face of evil is consent to evil. There's no gray area now.
That's right.
And Winston Churchill said, the man was cursed to have been born in uninteresting times. That's not true for us. And in Jeremiah 1, when the Lord said, before you were born, I knew you. Before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. And he goes on to say, I have ordained you to be a prophet of the nations. I have sanctified you. And he was telling him, and Jeremiah didn't have a single convert, and he was contending with the people that were stiff-necked and in total rebellion, who were being removed from the land that he loved and the country that he believed in and had a history in. And victory is not determined by the outcome, but by the obedience. You get discouraged because you say, I've done so much. I bought a pillow and I watched Fox News.
That's right.
You haven't done anything. The idea is we don't stop. Just keep going. You don't know the day or the hour. Work as though it depends on you. Pray as though it depends on God. And if you need anything, TP USA Faith is here for you. We got 10 seconds, and I'm just going to say, you are our heroes. We're blessed by you. We want to serve you. God bless you guys. Keep it up. Amen.